City of Salem, the City Council Committee on Administration and Finance met in the council chamber on Thursday, March 27th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing item number 126, appropriation of $25,000 for costs associated with conducting wastewater surveillance for highly pathogenic avian influenza, also known as H5N1 bird flu. This funding will cover 1 year of surveillance for all associated costs for analyzing wastewater samples conducted by BioBot Analytics. In attendance tonight, we have attending from the Administration and Finance Committee. We have Councilors Watson-Felt, Councilor Stott, Councilor Harvey, and Councilor Davis. Also joining us in attendance is Anna Friedman, our Finance Director, and Dave Greenbaum, our Health Agent. This request came from our health agent, and the funds would cover, as said in the order, 1 year of surveillance and costs for analyzing samples. And BioBot Analytics currently tests our wastewater for COVID, in which the cost is covered by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And the avian flu testing would be added at the city's expense. And I appreciate our health agent and our mayor thinking proactively about public health with the federal funding for public health being drastically cut. A few questions did come in via email, were sent to Mr. Greenbaum that will be discussed at this meeting. And responses included that no other committees in our area are doing this kind of proactive wastewater surveillance of bird flu at this time. So no data is available, and there has been minimal effect in Salem due to the bird flu. Symptoms are flu-like, and there is a lab test available for bird flu to give us some basic facts to start off with. And we'll start off with hearing from Mr. Greenbaum, and then we'll hear from the council, and then I will take public comment at the end. Thank you.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you. As Councilor Merkel said, we are requesting the $25,000 appropriation to conduct wastewater surveillance for avian influenza. We think this is a proactive approach to check to make sure that we don't have, bird flu in our community at this time. We understand it is a low risk at this time. However, it gives us an early indication and early detection if we do see bird flu or have bird flu infections in humans in our community. I'm happy to take questions, answer questions. As the councilor said, I did get some questions that I answered in writing, and I'm happy to expound upon those if people have further questions upon that.
Thank you. Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I think it would be helpful for the public to kind of maybe go over in detail a few of the questions that I had earlier that were super helpful for me. You touched upon it briefly, what other communities were doing this testing currently, none that we're aware of locally. If you could expound on that, and if you know of any, I guess, beyond locally, like if and how many cases of, because what we're concerned about here is the human transmission of the bird flu, correct? So obviously it's in birds. So it just kind of, I guess, if there are any trending, I mean, I tried to understand the data on the CDC website, but to me it looked, it had an indicator on there that it was low, and it looked kind of out in the western part of the country.
So there haven't been many cases of human cases of bird flu in the country. There have been some. We've had one fatal case in Louisiana. There aren't, there hasn't, like I said, there hasn't been a lot of cases, but there have been transmissions from cows, pigs to humans. I think one of the simplest ways for us to be able to detect if we have a transmission from animal to human and we have a human in the community that isn't diagnosed is through wastewater surveillance. As I said in my email to you, there are no communities that I'm aware of that are doing this locally or elsewhere. In the Commonwealth anyway, just because we haven't had any human cases in Massachusetts. That That being said, there's no way to tell if we won't have any cases in Massachusetts. And as Council Merkel mentioned, the federal government did slash public health funding yesterday by $12 billion to state health departments. And I would anticipate that is going to affect our COVID testing going forward, as well as numerous other programs as we work out what it is going to affect. I know that DPH and the administration at the state level is trying to determine just what that's going to look like for us.
Yeah, and thank you. That touches upon my second question of concern about the COVID testing funding being canceled on us, and where do we lie and how do we decide on our priorities for what's more important? Like I know for COVID sometimes it can be no symptoms, and that's why it's really important to have the additional, in my mind, ways of testing to see how, as a community, our levels are. And that to me seems important, especially if we may have to pay for that in the future going forward to continue to do versus something that might have flu-like symptoms and someone would be going for assistance there. So I'm wondering why we're not kind of taking a wait and see approach to this, especially knowing that we're in the budget season and we're kind of, now is the time to look at all of these items that we're going to be paying for or possibly paying for, how they fit in with the budget versus doing this one-off right now.
So I think one of the things with COVID is that we're going to see instances like we do with seasonal flu. We have therapeutics, we have vaccines for COVID that we don't necessarily have right now with H5N1 bird flu. And that's part of the reason that we're looking at trying to survey this proactively as opposed to react to it if we do end up with cases in the community. If we do end up losing our funding for COVID, like I said, we have those other mitigation and methods that we can use with Paxlovid, vaccinations, and we are going to see spikes in COVID. It's going to go up and down just like seasonal flu does. So I think that, knowing that that's going to be the reality as we move forward, that, having a novel virus like H5N1 might be a little bit more dangerous at this point than COVID is.
I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you. So to clarify, the point you made was that we have vaccines and some treatment for COVID, but there is no vaccine for bird flu.
I know the federal government was working on a vaccine for bird flu. I don't know where that stands at this point.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of one either. A question I have is, what would we do with that information? Like, what action can be taken if it is detected?
Well, I think that we would be able to see, how much activity we're seeing. Is it a large spike? Is it a small amount in the wastewater? If we're seeing large spikes, then I think we'd be able to determine that we may be seeing human-to-human transmission. And if that's the case, then I think that we could be on the verge of something really bad happening in our community. And it's not just going to be our community. I think it's going to be nationally. Unfortunately, I think bird flu might be our next pandemic.
That's interesting. So this testing would notify us if it has moved on to animals before it would move on to people? I
think it would tell us that it's moved towards people because it's going to be in our wastewater that's going to SESD and it's going to be tested. Those collections will happen before it goes into the wastewater treatment facility.
Thank you. Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair. Dave, is there any process for testing the birds for this illness?
I believe there is, but it's not anything we would do locally.
So you would want to spend $25,000 testing the wastewater for potential effects on humans without having any recorded instances, but there's no process to test the chickens that we know and are registered already in this city?
Unfortunately, we don't register and permit chickens in this city, so we know that there are people that keep chickens. We just don't know how many there are. So that went away.
But you know that there are people who keep chickens?
Oh, absolutely.
And you know who they are?
I don't know who they are, because the requirement for permitting went away many, many years ago. It was something that happened under my predecessor. It wasn't anything that I was involved with. But We don't permit them, we don't keep track of who has them, they can do it as they see fit. So we don't know how many chickens or how many households keep chickens in this city at this current time. It's something that I would like to revisit personally, so for instances like this, we would know, we would have a registry of where they are. That being said, you know, if an animal of any sort is showing illness, then we could test that animal, have it tested. We wouldn't do it locally. It would come from a state lab or a federal lab that would have to do that testing. And again, at the federal level, I don't know how much appetite there is for that. And if, with all these funding cuts, how much is that going to affect our state laboratory?
And does the state have a testing process right now for the public to leverage for those who own chickens?
That I don't know. I know that the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife taking reports of sick and dead birds, 5 or more, wild birds, geese, ducks, birds of prey, things like that, but they're only taking them if they're 5 or more birds. They're not taking, you know, one-offs.
And do you know if the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries has documented any large-scale deaths from bird flu of wild birds, 5 or more?
I don't know if they've attributed it to bird flu, but their assumption is that it's bird flu, so I can't say definitively.
So is there no test then for bird flu?
I believe there is a test, but I don't know if the tests have been, you know, if it's been determined that that test has come back as bird flu.
And is the same procedure in place where owners of animals like cows and pigs in Salem do not have to register their animals with the Board of Health?
Correct.
So do you know if there are any Salem residents that own cows or pigs?
I believe out off of Swampscott Road and Robinson Road, there might be some that have horses and cows. I don't know of any pigs, but I believe up that way there might be a couple of horses and pigs in Robinson Road.
And I'm sorry if this question was answered in the exchange online earlier. I haven't had a chance to read through the entire list of questions, but how many instances of bird flu in humans in Essex County in the last 18 months?
I believe it's 0.
Okay, thank you.
Again, Councilor Watson-Feld, how long, did you ask for 18 months? Was
Asked for 18 months
Thank you.
in all of Essex County. Thank you. Sorry, one more question. Thank you. So you asserted a few minutes ago that you think bird flu could be our next pandemic. What is that based on, in that opinion?
I think that it's just one of those viruses that's out there that has grown over the years inside animals, and if it jumps to humans and has human-to-human transmission, I think that that could lead to a next pandemic.
Okay, and the number of human deaths from bird flu, you said, was 1 in Louisiana in just, it was this last 12 months? Or what was that period?
I believe it was last 12 months, but I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah, I would be interested to know what the human deaths from bird flu were in the last 18 months since we saw an increase. Also, as I understand it, and again, not a professional on this, but bird flu, like most diseases, have their own cycles, their breed cycles, and I would be interested to understand if you have seen a steady increasing trajectory over the last 5 years in bird flu in Essex County versus regular cycles where there are upswings and then where they level out again. Do you know the answer to that question?
I don't know if I can say definitively that there's been upticks in Essex County specifically, but overall there have been upticks in bird flu, yes. It's
nationally, you're saying nationally?
Nationally in the Commonwealth. Over the last 6 to 8 months, we have seen wild birds in large numbers die off in Plymouth County specifically. We know that for a fact, and those are the birds that I spoke of earlier that they're attributing that potentially bird flu. They haven't definitively said to my knowledge, but
and are they testing to confirm that?
I believe so, but I'm not privy to that information.
So for my part personally, Chair and fellow committee members, I'm not feeling super confident in voting and supporting for $25,000 at this time, but I do think that we should be open to revisiting the conversation if we have more data that implies strong increasing trajectory, confirmed large-scale death in birds from bird flu in Essex County. And we can, I mean, maybe not even Essex, maybe we should take a look at from the Commonwealth's perspective, and just get us a little, I understand and I appreciate the position that we want to be ahead of this stuff, but I don't know that I can justify that personally right now, given the lack of data that we have for affecting the Commonwealth, Essex County, humans. That having been said, if the city would want to reintroduce a requirement to register birds and other farm animals, I would be supportive of that, because I agree. I think it's important to know at least what's here, for starters. So if you wanted to speak with the mayor about that, I would be happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Sorry. I was just curious if the state had been reached out to with a request for funding for this. I mean, I know that'd be difficult with federal funding cuts, but any kind of conversation there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And I don't know if this would be helpful, but any thoughts to kind of teaming up with other nearby communities that might be concerned about this, if there's a potential to share the cost?
We reached out, as I did explain in my email, there are several communities on the North Shore that their wastewater goes to the Dare Island facility, so I don't know that they could place a collection device there. I think we're one of only 1 or 2 communities that have the ability to place something near a local wastewater facility, and that's why it would be convenient for us, but I think that's what makes it possible. That's why we get the wastewater testing that we do at SESD.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, yes, that is helpful, and I did see that in emails, because we have our own local wastewater facility, so that's why it's feasible for us to, and not a lot of the other ones. Great. Councillor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I just want to point out, too, that the SESD is a shared facility regionally.
It is.
But this was a question that I asked you earlier, is for the public knowledge. I want to point out that it is an availability to test just Salem specific. Although looking at that, it's almost like regional might make more sense, but I don't want to get into the weeds of that. But there was...
I mean, I can say that I know we test COVID, the wastewater for COVID for Peabody and Salem. So could Peabody could we reach out to Peabody and see if they're interested? Absolutely. I did reach out to the 8 communities in our regional, public health agreement, and several of them said Dare Island was probably not going to be something that they could get involved in. I didn't hear back from Peabody, but I could definitely revisit that. I mean, I'm not opposed to that.
Great. Anything else from the committee? No? Okay, I'm just going to check to see if anybody, I don't see anybody here. Oh, yes. Councillor Varela. Yes, and this falls under public comment, so I believe that's all.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Andy Varela, 23 Cedar Crest Ave, and the co-owner of Maitland Mountain Farm here in Salem. So Holly and I are probably the largest entity of chickens here in the city of Salem. We have 150 laying hens on the property at 23 Cedar Crest Avenue. At this time, we have not seen any die-off or indication of bird flu, but if there was, as a responsible farmer, I would contact MDAR, Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, as well as the Health Department. If in fact we did have an outbreak of H1N1 or bird flu, I think I would probably be ground zero for contact and contaminate all you guys with bird flu. However, when it comes to contact, like actually transmitting bird flu, it really comes down to being in contact with their bedding, with specifically their feces, anything in the air when it comes to dander. Which, as a farmer engaged in chicken production, this is something I'm exposed to every single day. I think that there's another way to do this and to make sure that there's not an outbreak, but when it comes to the way when it comes to egg production and manufacturing of proteins or meat for meat birds here in the Commonwealth and the rest of the country, there is a stringent process for processing how that's done. For us, when we wash our eggs, we wash them with a 100 parts per million bleach solution, just to make sure there's not an issue with any kind of foreign contaminants within our eggs. And I really think that's the sentiment with most farmers, is to harvest your eggs, refrigerate them, harvest them, wash them, and then refrigerate them, and then put a limited shelf life on them. So I agree with the sentiment of our health agent of being ahead of this. If it was up to me, as a resident, I would be more than happy to be in compliance with the health department on our birds, and I'm sure people that have small flocks of chickens in the city of Salem will be happy to do so as well. The last thing anyone wants to do is share their resources with other people and get them sick. So I think that maybe we should look into our urban agriculture ordinance specific to domestic fowl and require people to either register with the health department or have some kind of documentation on how many chickens they have, where the chickens are from when it comes to origin, is really important. I think that might be a way to mitigate bird flu going forward. But as our health agent has said, there's not a huge outbreak of the bird flu, but that doesn't mean there's going to be. But I think if there's going to be an issue with that, it's going to come from a flock in Salem, and specifically probably one of the largest flocks, which would be probably Maitland Mountain Farm. So again, be happy to be a guinea pig on this and to submit as much information as possible, because like I said, everyone wants to be responsible about this. That could be a potential issue going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Next up for public comment, Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Patty Morcillo, 53 Broad Street. I had a question for Mr. Greenbaum, and I'm curious if this conversation was in front of the Board of Health and what that discussion was about, and kind of insight from them. I will say, as the liaison to the Board of Health during the early stages of COVID, I think there's a lot of experience on that board and a lot of desire to use that knowledge working towards the future. And it's something that I'm always curious about, what we learned from COVID, how we're going to move forward. Unfortunately, right now, we're in a position where we have very little help from the federal government, and I kind of agree. I think that we are stumbling towards another pandemic, and even if this data doesn't start to produce results that are usable for another 3 or 4 months, even that in itself is data, right, that it's not here. But, to say that if we don't see it in our county yet, it's not time to start testing, I'm afraid that we're going to let the cat out of the bag and then say, wait a minute, let's try and track this now. So I just want to hear a little bit more about whether there was a discussion in the Board of Health and what that was about.
So there wasn't a formal discussion with the board. I did brief them on the request that we were making to the council, and that I would be here this evening, and they were, I believe, supportive of the request. I think they understand that, trying to prevent any outbreak of any communicable disease is paramount in our role. So I'm more than happy to bring it back to them and discuss it with them deeper if that's what people would like.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Chair Merkel. Thank you for that. And I want to say for myself, I hope this doesn't come across as not being interested in, the next health epidemic, but I think it's more definitely a concern of what's coming down the pike budgetary-wise and where are we going to choose what to test going forward. And I'd like to have that be a holistic conversation, like an overall conversation. I think the Board of Health would be a great place to have that. Definitely reading the news and also concerned about how this could potentially become the next something. But but also as with a scientist sister who had her hand in creating the testing of wastewater, I hear about how there are so many things like that that could potentially be the next thing. So I think looking at the conversation a little more broadly, which would be, I think that's a great idea to have the Board of Health have that conversation, especially with it being budget season. I keep going back to that, like, $25,000 is not a huge chunk for the budget. I'm always greatly appreciative of Salem wanting to be at the forefront of public health and safety, but I'm also want to be slightly conservative about it during these times right now where we're just so unsure of what's going on. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I agree with that. That's where I'm landing as well. We are going to have a lot to have to prioritize with, as you said, the pullback on funds in supporting efforts for public health and the way this is going, and how there's talking about outbreaks in many different directions on the horizon. And I also agree that a broader discussion with the Board of Health, how to navigate that, in very fiscally challenging times, is a really, really good idea. Yeah. Councilor Harvey?
Thank you, Chair. My question would be, this is supposed to coincide with the other testing that they're doing at the same time, correct?
Correct.
COVID testing and stuff?
Yep.
What if, just say the state stops funding the COVID tests like they are now, and that stops? What happens with this testing? Does that stop also?
It would go for the 1 year that the funding was requested for.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so for clarity, if the COVID testing stops, our 1 year, they would have to adhere to the 1 year commitment they made to us.
That would be the intention, is that if the city paid for 1 year of testing, that they would abide by that contract for 1 year of testing.
Thank you. Any other public comments in the chamber? No? Okay, I'm just going to check online. And I don't see anyone. Okay. Hold on, I just want to check this one more time. Oh, hold on, attendees. Okay, I'm in the wrong. Okay, there actually are 2 attendees, and hold on one moment. Let me unmute that. And I have Cynthia's iPhone. I'm going to allow you to talk. If you would like to. Cynthia, I'll ask you to unmute. Okay, I'm going to now, this must be Lindsay Marcello. If you'd like to. Okay, so that, you can mute that. Okay, Councilor Stott?
Thank you, Chair Merkel. I have a question for Dave about timelines. and trying to figure out what to do with this matter in front of us. If we left this matter in committee for further discussion and you brought it back to the Board of Health, this testing, COVID testing, like the overall wastewater option testing, that maybe having kind of a roadmap game plan for poop testing in the future, discussion with the board, and also, we're entering budget season as well. Is that something that would be feasible to happen in the next couple of months in front of the board?
We have a meeting on April 8th. I could put it on that agenda.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, it's not, I don't think it's a rush pending for us, but I wouldn't want to have the matter stay in committee for, years without anything. But if it's something that you are amenable to bringing to the board and having a full conversation and then reporting back to us, I just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I could do it in April. I could do it in May.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a Board of Health meeting at the beginning of April. You said April 8th?
On the second Tuesday of every month.
Okay, so second Tuesday. Tuesday.
So with that, I would make a motion to leave the matter in committee.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to leave the appropriation of $25,000 for costs associated with conducting wastewater surveillance for bird flu. And this motion was Councillor Stott. It was seconded by Councillor Watson-Felt to leave this in committee. All in favor? Okay. So let the record show that 4 hands plus my own voted in favor of keeping this in committee. And do I have another motion? Councillor Watson's
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Watson-Felt, second by Councillor Stott. All in favor of adjournment? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Greenbaum, and thank you, Anna, for your attendance as well.